A few years ago, I was searching for my forever home, but instead of making a rational decision, I decided to use astrocartography and my spirit guides to help me find that place. And it worked. Where I ended up living, a cabin in the woods, has given me a sense of home that I've never experienced before. For the first time, I feel deeply rooted and like I don't need to keep searching anymore. And if everything changed tomorrow, I still wouldn't want to leave. And so that's how I know that this is my home. So if you're looking for a place to settle down using astrocartography, then keep watching as I share all of my secrets for how to do that. And if you're new here, I'm Katherine. I'm a professional astrocartographer and soul astrologer. And I'm fascinated by the way that location shape our soul's journey. I was born abroad and I lived in 7 different countries over the course of my life, so I know firsthand how different places call forth different versions of ourselves. And now I help spiritual people like yourself find their own home, even if it's just for a season and not for life. But before we dive into the steps of how I found my home that I absolutely adore, we need to talk about some common misconceptions about what a home is and how to find it using astrocartography. And this is because a concept like home can have different meanings for people, and this also has implications for how to use something like astrocartography to find your next home. When most people think about finding a place they can call home, they think about a perfect place. A place where everything feels easy, you feel comfortable, and a place where everything just clicks in your life. But that's not necessarily home from a spiritual perspective. Sometimes what we call home is just familiarity and not true belonging. Sometimes we chase a fantasy home that doesn't actually exist. And other times we let logic or social pressure define where we put down our roots and where we settle down for life. So let's break down some of these misconceptions so you know how to approach looking for home using astrocartography. The first thing to address is that people often confuse home with familiarity. They think that a place where they grew up, where they've lived the longest, where they have their family, where they went to school is a place to call home, and that can be true, but for some people that's not necessarily the case. Just because a place feels familiar doesn't mean it's a place where you can actually thrive. If you stay somewhere just because it feels familiar or it feels comfortable, you may be avoiding growth that may be necessary for your soul. A true home feels comfortable and feels safe, but it also helps you expand and become the best version of yourself. Which naturally brings me to the second point, which is that no home is perfect. Some people think that home is where everything makes sense, everything just clicks into place in your life, and while that may be true to some extent, there are certain aspects of you that will have to grow and evolve even in that place that you feel such a strong connection to. A home is a place where you can feel anchored in yourself and anchored to a specific location on earth, yes. But it's not a place where magically problems stop existing and you won't face any growth edges at all. Each location, regardless of how much you feel at home there, is there to help you grow and evolve and become the best version of yourself in this lifetime. So when you're looking for a sense of home, don't look for perfection, look for a sense of anchoring and alignment within yourself, and then allow life to play out in the way that it needs to for your highest good. Another common mistake I see is that people use logic instead of their intuition to find a place to call home. They rely solely on practical factors like job opportunities, affordability, and the climate. And these are important things. Like, I'm not trying to downgrade the importance of these things. We need to feel like these aspects of life are also meeting our needs. But if we rely solely on these practical factors, we may move to a place where everything seemingly checks the box, but we feel disconnected. It still doesn't feel like home. And that's because we've forgotten to bring in our heart and our soul and our intuition into that decision-making process. This is something I've seen in my clients from time to time as well, where they've moved to a place that makes logical sense. It ticks all the boxes, but they just don't feel at home. They just feel like this is not the place. Now, did they move to the wrong location? No, this location had something to teach them about their needs, about their values, about what truly matters to them. And that's valuable information. But in terms of long-term commitment, maybe not the place for them. On the flip side, I've also seen people make a choice that's not necessarily logical but felt right, and it ended up being the best decision of their life. Now, this didn't mean that they didn't experience any problems anymore. It simply meant that a part of them felt at home. They felt rooted. They felt anchored to that location, and so they were in a much stronger position to deal with whatever life wanted to throw their way. Personally, I didn't move a logical decision moving to a cabin in the woods either. I'm someone that's only lived in the city before. I've no experience taking care of the land. I've no experience renovating a 90-year-old house. But it's something that made sense to me. And yet that leap into the unknown became the deepest foundation of home that I've ever felt in my life. And of course, what made it easier is the lack of social pressure that I have in my life to follow a certain path. And so this brings us to the next point when it comes to finding a place called home. People often stay in places because of family expectations or social ties, or because they feel like they should stay in that location. But home shouldn't be about obligation. It's about resonance with your deepest self. Just because a place works for your family or your friends doesn't mean that it's the right place for you and for your growth. And you also shouldn't feel bad if your desires, if your needs are different from the people in your life. This is your path. Sometimes finding ourselves in locations that are not right for us, that make us feel disconnected or like we don't belong, help us understand ourselves on a much deeper level and understand what we truly need to feel more at home. And that often leads us to a place where we do feel like this is home and this is where we belong. And the last point I want to address is that some people think that if they move as far away as possible from anything that they know, then that's how they'll find their sense of home. But this is actually called escaping. Home isn't just about geography, it's also about personal alignment and a sense of deep home within yourself. If you haven't done the inner work yet, if you haven't addressed the reasons why you're escaping in the first place, whether you're conscious of it or not, then that new location won't magically fix everything about you or your life or your relationships. Yes, you will be different, your life will be different, your opportunities will be different, but just like you can't change your natal chart, you cannot change the lessons that your soul is here to experience and learn from. The only thing that you can really do is to address them, to grow from them and evolve beyond them. And that's how you can bring new experiences into your life that do not mirror your past experiences. So moving far away isn't necessarily going to work in the long term. It may be a short-term solution to help you heal that aspect of yourselves at a safe distance from where those hurts and traumas happened. But in the long run, it's better that you face what you've been trying to avoid or escape from or get a breather from. And once you do that, that's when that sense of home is easier to connect with, because it's not driven by running away from something. It's driven by an attraction to something that can bring deeper ease and joy into your life. So if we take all of this into consideration, then finding a sense of home using astrocartography is one of the trickiest questions to ask, because it has so many layers and it's not something that's easy to identify or connect to a specific planetary line. But don't worry, I'll help you tackle this question regardless. The first and most important thing I have to lead with is that no astrocartography line specifically will give you a sense of home. Most locations will have different lines going on for you and not just the one, which means that you're going to get a mixed bag. And even identifying what those lines should be that could give you a stronger sense of home is tricky, because some people prefer locations that are more intense. Some people prefer locations that are more quiet. It really depends on your natal story and where you are in your soul's journey. There's also a lot of noise online around some lines being very difficult for you or bad and other lines being good for you. But this is very subjective, because it depends on how those planets are placed in your natal chart. Are they strong for you? Are they weakened for you? And that will color the way in which you experience that planetary line as well. So when it comes to astrocartography, we really need to get to know your natal chart first before we look at the map at all. So that's step number 1. And step number 2 is putting aside astrology and astrocartography at least for a minute and getting in touch with your own intuitive guidance. What I mean by that is that we do not look at the map without having a single clue as to where to look. Instead, what I want you to do is be very honest about all those places around the world or around the country that you live in that you've secretly been drawn to. Something that I see in my sessions a lot is that people that come as a blank slate actually always have 1 or 2 secret locations that they've been wondering about, and they're hoping that I would mention them in my reading. And when I don't, when I share locations that are not necessarily top of mind for them, they end up being disappointed. But when I end up mentioning a location that they've secretly wondered about or forgotten about, that's when they light up. That's when they feel like, wow, this is meant for me. This doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Now, when I compare that with people who have locations in mind and want to get insight into what that location could be like for them, what sort of lessons could it have in store for them, what sort of blessings could it have in store for them, and especially when I've had the opportunity to look at multiple locations that a person has lived in the past, I can see that the soul has always known where they need to go next. And so over time, I've developed a great sense of trust when it comes to people's own intuitive guidance. So if you're someone that claims you have no idea where to go next or where your home could be, then I want to encourage you to write down all of those secret locations that you have a weird connection with. It may be through the movies that you like to watch about that location. It may be music that comes from that place. It can be art that you enjoy from the artist in that region. It doesn't matter what the connection is, but if you have a weird connection with a location or a region or a city, then write that down. Create a little list of all these secret locations that you have some type of connection to, and a positive one at that. Then I want you to take those locations and look them up on your astrocartography map. What lines actually go through those locations, and how does that make you feel about the kind of life that you want to have? Now, naturally, you're going to have a mixed bag of planetary lines, that you're going to have supportive ones, you're going to have challenging ones. That's okay. We're not looking for a perfect place here. Remember, your home is meant to expand you as much as it's meant to anchor you, right? And once you have a clearer understanding of what these planetary lines are about, how they relate to your natal chart, that's when you can pull up your relocated chart for the locations that really stand out for you, that really make you feel excited and nervous and curious and maybe a little bit scared to even consider that location as your next home or your forever home. You generate your relocated chart by adjusting your time zone and your birth location to the destination. So you don't take into consideration daylight savings or anything like that. You just add the time zone difference to your birth time and you change your birth location, and then you see what happens to your natal chart. Your relocated chart helps you understand how your entire life will change in that location, in addition to the insight that you get from your planetary lines. And in your new chart, you can look at your love relationships, you can look at your career, you can look at what happens in your house of home, your fourth house. You can dive into all of the details that you're looking to change or experience in your forever home. In addition to that, you're also able to understand what sort of challenges is that location likely to bring up for you and how to navigate that. All of that is information that is in your natal chart. The only requirement here is that you learn to read your natal chart. And again, I encourage you to not get hung up on the challenges, unless of course they are in the majority for the locations that you have in mind. But if they're not, if it's just one or two lines, if it's a fair balance between positive influences and more challenging influences, then I don't want you to rule out locations that actually have a lot to offer for your personal growth and for your sense of abundance. I should also mention that this isn't something that you can do in one sitting unless you're very proficient in astrology and astrocartography, because there are always layers to a natal chart. We've got the transits, we've got life cycles. All of these things are things that can impact how a location will play out for us. But the thing that you should trust the most, regardless of what the astrology says, is your intuition. So the final thing I want you to do before you decide on moving somewhere is to visit that location if you can. And you'll feel on your body whether this feels like the right place for you for this next phase in your life or it doesn't. I'll give you a very personal example to round up this topic. So when I was 18, I was convinced that I wanted to go to university in Iceland. I'd never been. There was just this weird sense of attraction that I had to Iceland. I knew nothing about astrocartography at the time, right? So I went there, I went to visit, and the minute the plane landed, I felt like this is a hard no. And later on, once I did learn about astrocartography, I looked up Iceland. It had my Pluto line there, a power line, and a Neptune line crossing, which is intense energy happening right there. So even though this wasn't a location where I felt like I wanted to settle down, that trip gave me a lot of courage to continue traveling on my own and explore the world on my own. It literally helped me let go of the familiar. And so in a way, Iceland served its purpose for the phase of my life that I was in, but it wasn't a place for me to settle down in. Which naturally, of course, means that if you're looking for a forever home now, maybe that's not what's best for you. Maybe you're meant to find a place that you'll live in for 5 years, 7 years, maybe 10 years, but not longer than that. But that doesn't mean that place is wrong for you or it's not right for you. There are lessons and blessings waiting for you there, and you just need to trust that they are for your highest good. So trust your intuition, use astrocartography to put words to why you feel drawn to certain locations, and visit those locations before you decide that this is precisely where you want to be moving next. If you're ready to dive deeper, I've got a free resource on astrocartography down below, which I encourage you to download. And if you resonated with this video, let me know in the comments what are these secret locations that you've always been drawn to for whatever reason. I'd love to hear what those are. And finally, if you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like and subscribe so that other people that are looking for their forever home could find this video as well. Thank you so much for watching.